Crypt Keepers, thank you for tuning into AmysCrypt. Today we're going to talk about one of the most haunted and recognisable places in all of Scotland, Edinburgh Castle. Before we get started, I just wanted to point out to you all my AmysCrypt hoodie, and that is because I love it so much. If you like it too, I do have a whole merch store set up below. I have hats, t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers, all sorts of cool things. They're linked below, so go check them out if you want to grab some merch of your own. But let's get into things. Edinburgh Castle sits high on a hill overlooking the whole city, and this hill is known as Castle Rock, which sounds very Game of Thrones-y, which I love, but it is actually an extinct volcano. Now the castle's pretty old. The structure dates back to the 12th century, though there are bits and bobs that have been built onto it at later dates. Now it does have a pretty dark history. There's been a lot of bloodshed and even war here at Edinburgh Castle. Because there was a lot of long-term conflict between the English and the Scottish monarchs, there was a lot of battles fought at Edinburgh Castle. And to hold Edinburgh Castle was to hold the city of Edinburgh, and to hold the city of Edinburgh was to hold the country of Scotland. This led to many battles, and it also saw power and the castle swapped between the British and Scottish for a long time. This also came at a great cost to the people living in and around the castle. Obviously there was a lot of loss of life and a lot of suffering because of this. Now there is historical evidence that suggests there was at least 26 sieges that took place at Edinburgh Castle. That makes it one of the most besieged and attacked landmarks in the whole world. Now Edinburgh Castle also functioned as a royal residence for a long time, as well as military barracks. Today it's open to the public. It houses the Scottish Crown Jewels, it houses the Scottish National War Memorial, as well as War Museum, and it's a very interesting place to go and visit. Now, although this is a very bustling and very busy tourist destination, there's still a lot of staff as well as visitors that come through the castle reporting to have paranormal experiences. And Edinburgh Castle is actually thought to be an extremely haunted place. Now, one of the most haunted parts of the castle is of course its dungeon. And this really never comes as a surprise to anybody. There was a lot of people kept prisoner down there. There was also a lot of torture. And that was on top of the already torturous conditions. It was very poor to be imprisoned down there, and there was a lot of people that suffered malnourishment, and resultantly a lot of people died down there. And that is why people say that this is one of the most haunted places in the castle. They believe there are a lot of these former prisoners still suffering in the depths of the dungeon. All that misery and despair has just been trapped down there. One of the most famous stories about one of the prisoners down in the dungeon, which also results in a ghost story, is that of a man who actually attempted to escape. And in a way he did escape the dungeon. His plan was to bury himself in a wheelbarrow filled with dung. So he covered himself in feces, and he did expect to be wheeled out of the castle and down the Royal Mile, which is the very famous street that connects right up to the castle. Instead of going down the Royal Mile though, they disposed of the dung over the edge of Castle Rock, which was very bad. This man actually fell to his death, which is quite horrific. Ever since though, people believe his ghost has hung around, and he's supposed to be quite disgruntled and has actually tried to push people from the castle. And you guys will know if he is around you because he is supposed to be accompanied by a really strong and intense smell of poo. So if you do head to the castle, just be wary of that. Another of Edinburgh Castle's really famous ghost stories relates to a young piper boy. Now, a couple of hundred years ago, there was all these vast tunnels found underneath Edinburgh Castle, and people were so curious of them wanting to know where they led, they found an entrance. Now, the only thing with this entrance was it was a very tight fit, so obviously they sent down the very small piper boy. He was the only one who could fit through this hole. He went in very brave and was instructed to play his bagpipes as he followed the tunnel. That way everyone above ground could kind of hear him and follow him to see where the tunnel led and how far down this tunnel went. Anyways, the young boy entered the tunnel, was playing his bagpipes. Everyone could hear him above ground and was following him. They followed him for quite a distance down the Royal Mile until all of a sudden silence fell and the boy stopped playing his bagpipes. Now, despite some rescue attempts, no one actually knows what happened to this unfortunate young boy. He's presumed dead, and many people believe that he continues to haunt that tunnel. There's been a lot of reports in that area of people hearing the faint sound of muffled bagpipes playing when there's nobody around, and people believe that that is the piper boy still trying to find his way out of the tunnel. Interestingly, there is another young boy who haunts the castle to play his musical instrument. This young boy is that of a drummer boy. Now, he actually shows himself to people as being a headless apparition playing his drum. He hasn't been sighted or heard in a long time though, because legend has it he only appears and plays his drum before the castle comes under battle. Obviously, there hasn't been a lot of battles in a long time, but there has been many in the past, and this drummer boy has been sighted and heard a lot of times. But what is weird is no one really knows who this young boy is, where he came from, or really what his purpose is. He is a pretty dark omen for the castle though, because obviously you're about to come under attack and the castle is about to experience even more death. Now, I have another very tragic story that has resulted in a ghost at Edinburgh Castle, and this one is of a young lady named Janet Douglas. Now, Janet was accused of witchcraft by the then King of Scotland in the 1500s, and as a result she was imprisoned and thrown in the dungeons of Edinburgh Castle. A lot of her family and her servants that worked with her were then tortured to gain evidence against her in her witch trial. Obviously, this isn't the fairest way to gain evidence, and eventually they did gain enough to convict her of witchcraft. She was sentenced to death and then burnt at the stake at Edinburgh Castle. Now, I can't think of anything worse than burning at the stake, but they did make Janet's young 16-year-old son watch her burn alive, which is pretty dark and pretty disturbing, pretty messed up. And it's no wonder why many people believe that Janet has now come back to haunt the castle, though she's also fought to haunt another castle across the country that she also used to live at. Another one, which is probably my favourite ghost story here at Edinburgh Castle, is a haunting of a dog. Now, you guys know that I love animals. A lot of people have reported to see a large black dog running around the castle grounds, and this dog will sometimes just vanish and disappear into thin air. The dog is supposedly connected to the dog cemetery which they have on the castle grounds, and it also kind of reminds me of a very nearby haunting in Edinburgh, which is at the Greyfriars Kirkyard, which is of Greyfriars Bobby. I have a video all about that little guy, and I'm going to link that below because it is one of my favourite ghost stories. Now, one of the things that I find the most interesting about all the paranormal activity at Edinburgh Castle is how it has been investigated. So back in 2001, a Dr. Richard Wiseman conducted a pretty big study of the paranormal activity within Edinburgh Castle. And this basically consisted of 200 subjects who were split into very small groups and taken through some of the most haunted places in the castle. These people didn't have any prior knowledge of hauntings, and they were led through tunnels, cellars, dungeons, many rooms that supposedly had pre-existing hauntings or ghost stories attached to them. Now, what is interesting to note that came from this study was that more than half of the subjects that came through the castle reported to have unexplainable paranormal experiences. And a lot of these experiences occurred in the rooms that are supposedly the haunted rooms. Now, why this doesn't really prove that Edinburgh Castle is haunted or that the paranormal exists, there were some pretty interesting reports to come out of this study. So a lot of people reported to feel as though they were being watched, have their clothing tugged on, feeling burning sensations on their skin. They cited shadow figures. They even experienced sudden drops in temperature. There was a whole array of different experiences that people reported from this little study, and I just think that it's really cool. And if they're ever thinking of doing that type of study again, I'll definitely put my hand up for that. I would volunteer to go through Edinburgh Castle. So what do you guys think of Edinburgh Castle? Do you think that the castle could be haunted? Have you visited before? Maybe you've had an experience of your own. Maybe you've visited another Scottish castle that was really cool and you had an experience there. Either way, I want to hear all about it in the comments. Please share your thoughts. I do hope that you liked this video though. I did a sit down video a little while ago and you guys responded pretty well to it. So let me know if you want me to do more about this. This is actually some footage I've been hanging on to for a really long time. I've wanted to talk about Edinburgh Castle for ages. I absolutely love castles. They're some of my favorite places, favorite history ever. I do wish that I spent a lot more time in Scotland. I wish that I stayed in Edinburgh longer. I actually arrived like the day the Edinburgh Fringe Festival was going on and it was really busy. All the accommodation in the city was like booked out and it was super expensive, so I didn't get to see a lot of the other haunted places in Edinburgh, and I know that there are so many. For that reason, I think that this is a place I will go back to in my life. It's one of my goals to get back to Scotland. There's a lot of other castles over there, a lot of other haunted castles as well that I really want to check out. But thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to like, comment, share and subscribe. If you want to do a bit more reading on this haunted castle or any others that I have visited, head to AmysCrypt.com. You guys can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at AmysCrypt. Cheers again, Crypt Keepers. Until next time.